We're restructuring. Hope there's no hard feelings. You understand how business works. My name's Frank Delaney. I'm 64 years old and I've spent 29 years keeping Crestwood Technologies running. 29 years of showing up at 5:30 in the morning, fixing what was broken, training every new hire who walked through those doors. I never took a sick day, never complained when they asked me to work weekends, never said no when they needed someone to stay late and make sure the servers didn't crash overnight. 4 days. That's all I had left before my full pension benefits kicked in. 4 days before I could walk out of there with my head high and my future secure. 29 years and 11 months of service, and Brandon Chase just told me I was done. He didn't even look at me when he said it. Just stared at his laptop screen like I was some line item on a spreadsheet he was crossing out. The conference room felt smaller than usual, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like they always did when the building got quiet. I could see through the glass walls to the cubicles where people I'd trained were working, completely unaware that the guy who'd shown them how to fix the air conditioning system and taught them which vendors to trust was getting his walking papers. Budget cuts, Brandon continued, finally glancing up. We're moving in a leaner direction. Nothing personal, Frank, just business. I nodded. What else was I supposed to do? Argue? Beg? I'd seen other guys my age get escorted out by security for making a scene. That wasn't going to be me. The termination paperwork was already printed and waiting in a manila folder. Standard stuff: final paycheck calculations, COBRA information, return of company property. I signed where they told me to sign. Dated everything with the same pen I'd been using for the past 5 years, the one with the Crestwood logo that was starting to fade. Badge and keys, Brandon said, holding out his hand. I unclipped the ID badge from my belt, the same spot it had lived for nearly 3 decades. The plastic was worn smooth from years of swiping through card readers. My employee photo looked younger, taken back when my hair was still brown, and I thought I'd retire from this place with dignity. The keys felt heavier than they should have. Master keys to every door in the building, keys to the equipment rooms, the supply closets, the loading dock. I'd been trusted with everything. I placed them in Brandon's palm without a word, picked up my copy of the paperwork and walked out. Past the cubicles where people were already looking away. Past the break room where I'd eaten lunch at the same table for 29 years. Past the security desk where I'd checked in thousands of times. The parking lot was quiet. My truck started on the first try, same as always. I sat there for a minute, engine running, looking back at the building. Something felt off about the whole thing, but I couldn't put my finger on what. I built my life around that place. Started there when I was 35, fresh off a divorce that took half of everything I owned. The job wasn't glamorous. Facilities management meant I was the guy who fixed the plumbing when it backed up and made sure the heat worked in winter. But it was steady work with good benefits, and they promised me that if I stuck around, they'd take care of me when I got old. Crestwood wasn't much back then. Maybe 50 employees, 2 buildings, still trying to figure out what kind of tech company they wanted to be. I watched them grow, helped them expand into 4 buildings across the industrial district. When they needed someone to oversee the construction of the new data center, they asked me. When the city inspectors came around asking questions about building codes, they sent me to deal with them. I trained every facilities person who came after me, showed them how to read the blueprints, how to negotiate with contractors, how to keep everything running without breaking the budget. Most of them moved on to better jobs eventually. I stayed. This was my place. My wife passed away 8 years ago. Cancer. The company health insurance covered most of the treatments, and Brandon's predecessor let me take all the time I needed for doctor appointments and hospital stays. When she died, half the office came to the funeral. They were good people, good company. Brandon was different when he took over 3 years ago. Younger, business degree from some fancy school. He looked at everything like it was a problem that needed solving, including the people who'd been there since before he was born. Started bringing in consultants to optimize operational efficiency. Started talking about right-sizing the workforce. The signs were there if I'd wanted to see them. Brandon stopped saying hello when he passed me in the hallway. stopped including me in the monthly department meetings. When I submitted my budget requests, they came back with questions I'd never had to answer before. Why did we need so many maintenance contracts? Could we get by with fewer safety inspections? Wasn't I getting a little old to be climbing ladders and crawling around in equipment rooms? I figured he was just trying to assert himself as the new boss, show everyone he was making changes. I'd seen it before with other managers. They come in, make some noise, then settle into the routine once they realize how things actually work. But there were other things too. Conversations that stopped when I walked into a room. Meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. A new hire in facilities who asked me questions about my job responsibilities. Things he shouldn't have needed to know unless someone was planning to have him take over. I should have paid more attention. Should have asked more questions. But I was 4 days away from my pension vesting, and all I could think about was making it to the finish line. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the termination paperwork spread out in front of me. The numbers didn't add up the way they should have. According to my calculations, I had 29 years and 11 months of service. According to their paperwork, I had 29 years and 10 months, 1 month short of full pension benefits. I pulled out my old employee handbook, the one from 15 years ago when they changed the retirement policy. It was clear as day. 30 years of service or age 65, whichever came first, for full benefits. I was 64 with 29 years and 11 months. 4 more days and I would have hit the 30-year mark. Then I remembered the company-wide memo Brandon had sent out just last month. I'd kept a copy because it seemed important. Updates to the employee handbook, clarifications about retirement benefits, assurance that the company was committed to honoring all existing agreements. I found it in my filing cabinet, right where I'd left it. Effective immediately, all retirement benefit calculations will be based on continuous years of service as defined in the current employee handbook. Employees approaching retirement eligibility should review their service records to ensure accuracy. I read it 3 times. Then I got out my calculator and started going through my pay stubs. Every single one, going back 15 years. Holiday pay, overtime, vacation days, sick leave. Everything was documented. Everything matched up to 29 years and 11 months of service as of this Friday. They'd miscalculated on purpose, or maybe they just hoped I wouldn't notice. I thought about calling Brandon, demanding they fix the paperwork. But what was the point? He'd already made it clear that I was done. Calling him would just give him a chance to come up with another excuse, another reason why the rules didn't apply to my situation. I thought about getting a lawyer, but lawyers cost money I didn't have. And fighting a big company with deep pockets was a young man's game. Then I remembered Janice O'Connell. She'd worked in human resources at Crestwood for 12 years before retiring last year. Sharp woman, always played by the book, never let the company cut corners when it came to employee rights. I'd heard through the grapevine that she was doing consulting work now, helping other companies avoid the kind of legal problems that came from treating employees badly. I found her number in my old contacts and stared at it for a long time. Making that call would mean admitting that I'd been screwed over. It would mean fighting back instead of just accepting what had happened and moving on. But sitting there in my kitchen, looking at 29 years of pay stubs and a termination letter that didn't match the facts, I realized something had shifted inside me. I wasn't angry. I was focused. I picked up the phone and dialed. Janice answered on the second ring. Her voice was the same as I remembered. Direct, no nonsense, the kind of tone that made you want to tell her the truth whether you planned to or not. "Frank Delaney," she said before I could introduce myself. "I heard about what happened. Word travels fast in this business." I laid out everything for her. The timing of my termination, the discrepancy in the service calculation, Brandon's attitude over the past few months. She listened without interrupting, asking pointed questions about dates and documentation. When I finished, there was a long pause. "You kept all your pay stubs?" she asked. "Everyone. Company memos? Policy updates? Everything important. My wife always told me to keep good records." "Smart woman, Frank, I need you to listen carefully. What Brandon did isn't just wrong, it's illegal. Federal law protects employees from being terminated to prevent them from collecting earned benefits. But proving it requires more than just the timing. We need to show intent. She explained how these cases worked. The Department of Labor took them seriously, but they needed solid evidence, documentation, a pattern of behavior, something that showed the termination wasn't just bad timing but deliberate fraud. Bring everything to my office Monday morning, she said. Don't talk to anyone at Crestwood. Don't post anything on social media. Don't even tell your neighbors what happened. If this goes where I think it's going, we want them to believe they got away with it. Monday morning, I drove to Janice's office with 3 boxes of paperwork: pay stubs, employee handbooks, memos, performance reviews, email printouts. 29 years of documentation organized in chronological order. She went through everything methodically, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When she got to Brandon's memo from last month, she stopped and read it twice. "This is golden," she said. "He put it in writing that service calculations should be accurate. Then he fires you with an inaccurate calculation 4 days before you hit 30 years. Either he's incompetent or he's lying. What's the difference? Incompetence gets you your job back. Lying gets you your job back plus damages plus a federal investigation that could shut down their entire human resources department." She explained the process. File a complaint with the Department of Labor. They'd investigate, interview witnesses, review documents. If they found evidence of deliberate benefit denial, Crestwood would face serious penalties. Not just fines, potential criminal charges for the people involved. "How long does it take?" I asked. "Depends. Could be weeks, could be months. But Frank, you need to understand something. Once we file this complaint, there's no going back. Brandon's going to know you didn't just walk away quietly. He's going to fight back." She was right about that part. Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. Brandon's name on the caller ID. "Frank, I heard you've been talking to people about your termination. I hope you're not planning to do anything stupid." I didn't say anything. "Look, I get it, you're upset. But we followed company policy to the letter. Your service record shows 29 years and 10 months. I've got the documentation right here." "What documentation?" "Your hiring date. January 15th, 1996. Your termination date. November 8th, 2024. Simple math, Frank." I knew he was lying. I started at Crestwood on December 15th, 1995. I had the offer letter to prove it. But Brandon was setting up his defense, trying to get me to argue with him over the phone where he could control the conversation. "I'm not looking for trouble," I said. "Good. That's good to hear. Because if someone were to file a frivolous complaint against the company, well, we'd have to defend ourselves. And defending ourselves might involve looking very closely at that person's work history, making sure they never violated any company policies, never took anything that didn't belong to them, never said anything that might have hurt the company's reputation. The threat was clear. Fight back, and they'd destroy whatever was left of my reputation." "I understand," I said, and hung up. But I didn't understand. Not really. Because what Brandon didn't know was that Janice had already filed the complaint that morning. Janice called me Wednesday evening with news that changed everything. "The Department of Labor moved fast on this one," she said. "They've been watching Crestwood for a while. Turns out you're not the first person this happened to." She'd spoken with the investigator assigned to my case. Over the past 2 years, 3 other longtime employees at Crestwood had been terminated within months of becoming eligible for full pension benefits. All of them in their 60s. All of them with service records that had been mysteriously miscalculated. "They're calling it a pattern," Janice explained. "Systematic benefit denial, the kind of thing that gets companies put on federal watch lists." But there was more. The investigator had requested personnel files for all 4 terminated employees. What they found was a series of emails between Brandon and the new Human Resources Director, discussing ways to optimize the workforce and reduce long-term benefit obligations. "They weren't even smart about it," Janice said. "Used company email. Talked about specific employees by name. Your name was mentioned 6 times in the past 3 months." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What did they say about me? That you were a legacy cost, that your pension and healthcare benefits would represent a significant ongoing expense, that your position could be eliminated and your responsibilities distributed among existing staff. They'd been planning this for months. While I was coming in early and staying late, while I was training new people and fixing their problems, they were figuring out how to get rid of me without paying what they owed. There's something else, Janice continued. The investigator wants to interview you Thursday morning. They're bringing someone from the criminal division. Criminal? Frank, when a company deliberately terminates employees to avoid paying earned benefits, that's not just a civil matter. That's fraud. Wire fraud if they used electronic communications to plan it. The people involved can go to prison. Thursday morning, I sat in a conference room at the Department of Labor building downtown. Two investigators, both younger than my son, both wearing suits that cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. They recorded everything, asked me to walk through my employment history year by year, showed me printouts of emails I'd never seen. The emails were worse than Janice had described. Brandon and the Human Resources Director hadn't just discussed terminating me. They'd discussed terminating anyone who was close to pension eligibility. They called it proactive workforce management. They had a spreadsheet with names and dates and projected savings. Mr. Delaney, one of the investigators said, based on what we've seen, we believe Crestwood Technologies engaged in a deliberate scheme to defraud multiple employees of earned benefits. Your case is just the most recent example. They showed me documents I'd never seen before. Internal company communications about the cost of maintaining older employees, memos about renegotiating pension obligations, a presentation to the board of directors that included a slide titled Legacy Employee Transition Strategy. My name was on that slide, along with the names of the 3 other employees who'd been terminated. We were all listed under Q4 optimization targets. We're going to need you to testify, the other investigator said. This is going to trial, federal court. The people responsible are going to be held accountable. I thought about Brandon sitting in that conference room, telling me it was just business, nothing personal. I thought about 29 years of getting up before sunrise, of fixing things that were broken, of believing that loyalty would be rewarded. What do you need me to do? The federal investigation moved faster than anyone expected. By the following Monday, investigators had seized Crestwood's email servers and interviewed 6 current employees. By Wednesday, they'd executed a search warrant on Brandon's office and the Human Resources Department. Janice kept me updated on everything. The investigators had found more evidence than they knew what to do with. Internal documents dating back 3 years showing a systematic plan to eliminate older employees. Spreadsheets calculating pension savings. Email threads discussing the best timing for terminations to avoid legal challenges. They kept records of everything, Janice told me over coffee Thursday morning. It's like they wanted to get caught. The plan was simple and brutal. Identify employees approaching pension eligibility. Find reasons to question their performance or necessity. Terminate them just before their benefits vested. Save millions in long-term costs. Brandon had presented it to the board as a financial necessity. The company was growing, but pension obligations were eating into profits. Younger employees cost less to insure and didn't require long-term benefit commitments. It was basic business math. What he hadn't counted on was someone like me keeping detailed records, or someone like Janice understanding federal employment law, or investigators who took benefit fraud seriously. Friday afternoon, Brandon called me again. This time his voice was different, higher-pitched, nervous. Frank, I think there's been a misunderstanding about your termination. We should talk. Work something out. What kind of misunderstanding? Your service record. We may have made an error in the calculation. If you'd be willing to come in Monday morning, we could review everything. Make sure you get what you deserve. He was panicking. The investigation was public now, mentioned in the business section of the newspaper. Crestwood's stock price had dropped 15% in 2 days. The board was asking questions Brandon couldn't answer. I don't think that's necessary, I said. Frank, please. We've worked together for years. Let's handle this professionally. No lawyers, no government agencies. Just 2 reasonable people working out a disagreement. But it was too late for reasonable. The Department of Labor had already filed charges. Criminal charges, not just civil ones. Brandon was facing up to 5 years in federal prison for wire fraud and conspiracy to defraud employees of earned benefits. Monday morning, I got a call from the company's lawyer. Not Brandon, the actual company lawyer, the one they brought in when things got serious. "Mr. Delaney, my client would like to discuss a settlement, full reinstatement of your pension benefits, health care coverage, and additional compensation for the inconvenience you've experienced." "How much additional compensation?" "We're prepared to offer $50,000, provided you agree not to pursue further legal action." I told him I'd think about it. Then I called Janice. "Don't take it," she said immediately. "Frank, they're scared. The criminal charges are just the beginning. Once this hits federal court, other employees are going to come forward. This is going to be a class action lawsuit worth millions." She was right. By Tuesday, the Department of Labor had been contacted by 8 more current and former Crestwood employees who suspected their terminations or benefit calculations were fraudulent. By Thursday, it was 15. The local news picked up the story. Federal investigation targets local tech company. Brandon's photo was on the front page of the business section, looking uncomfortable in a suit that suddenly seemed too big for him. I didn't have to do anything but wait. The system was working exactly the way it was supposed to work. And Brandon was about to learn what it felt like to have your future decided by someone else. Tuesday morning, I was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when my phone rang. Janice calling earlier than usual. "Turn on Channel 6, she said. "Now." I found the remote and switched to the local news. Brandon Chase was being led out of the Crestwood building in handcuffs. Federal agents carrying boxes of documents behind him. The reporter was talking about wire fraud charges and conspiracy to defraud employees of earned benefits. Federal prosecutors allege that Chase and Human Resources Director Patricia Walsh engaged in a systematic scheme to terminate longtime employees just before they became eligible for full pension benefits, the reporter said. The alleged fraud cost affected employees hundreds of thousands of dollars in earned benefits. The camera showed Brandon stumbling slightly as the agents helped him into a federal marshal's vehicle. His face was pale, his usually perfect hair disheveled. He looked smaller than I remembered. The indictment charges Chase with 14 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy, the reporter continued. If convicted, he faces up to 70 years in federal prison. I turned off the television and sat in the quiet of my kitchen. 29 years of getting up before sunrise, of fixing things that were broken, of believing that loyalty mattered. It had mattered, just not the way I thought. Janice called back an hour later with more news. The Department of Labor had completed their investigation. 18 employees had been affected by the scheme. Total damages exceeded $2 million. Crestwood's board had voted to terminate Brandon and Walsh immediately and had agreed to full restitution for all affected employees. "Your pension is fully restored," she said, "backdated to when it should have vested, plus health care benefits and additional compensation for damages." "How much additional compensation?" $200,000 plus your legal fees. I thought about Brandon telling me it was just business, nothing personal, just the way things worked. 3 months later, I was back in my workshop building a bookshelf for my daughter. The tools felt good in my hands. The smell of sawdust and the sound of wood being shaped into something useful reminded me why I'd always been good at fixing things. My pension payments had started right on schedule. The additional compensation sat in my savings account, earning interest. I hadn't touched it yet. Wasn't sure I needed to. After 29 years of steady work, I had everything I needed. Brandon had pleaded guilty to federal charges and been sentenced to 18 months in prison. Patricia Walsh got 6 months and 2 years of probation. Crestwood had been acquired by a larger company that cleaned house in the management ranks. The local newspaper had run a follow-up story about the case. Local man's complaint leads to federal investigation. They'd wanted to interview me, but I declined. I wasn't looking for attention or recognition. I just wanted what I'd earned. My daughter called while I was sanding the bookshelf. She'd seen the news story online and wanted to make sure I was doing okay. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said, "for standing up for yourself." "I didn't do anything special," I told her. "Just made a phone call." Sometimes that's enough. I finished the bookshelf that afternoon and loaded it into my truck. My daughter had been asking for one for months, and I finally had the time to build it right. Solid oak, dovetail joints, the kind of thing that would last for decades. As I drove to her house, I thought about the difference between building something and just fixing what someone else had broken. Both had their place. Both mattered. But building something new felt better.